Israeli settlers, a phenomenon that has intensified dramatically since October 7, 2023. This report details the systemic nature of these attacks, which include arson, vandalism, theft, harassment, and killings, and profoundly impact Palestinian communities. The tragic death of Saif Musalit, a Palestinian American, serves as a stark illustration of the lethal consequences when such violence is met with impunity and state complicity. International law unequivocally deems Israeli settlements illegal and classifies many acts of settler violence as international crimes, including forcible transfer and elements of apartheid. Despite this clear legal framework, the Israeli legal system has consistently failed to hold perpetrators accountable, fostering a pervasive culture of immunity that emboldens further aggression. While some international diplomatic actions and sanctions have been initiated, they are widely perceived as insufficient and inconsistent, failing to address the root causes of the violence or to compel Israel, as the occupying power, to uphold its obligations under international law. This report underscores the urgent need for robust, coordinated international intervention to dismantle illegal settlements, ensure accountability for all perpetrators, and uphold the fundamental rights and dignity of the Palestinian people. 2. The grave reality of Israeli settler violence in the West Bank. The occupied West Bank is gripped by a pervasive and escalating campaign of violence carried out by Israeli settlers against Palestinian communities. This is not a series of isolated incidents, but a systemic strategy designed to terrorize, harm, and dispossess Palestinians, ultimately aiming to expand Israeli control over the territory. A. Nature and scale of attacks. A systemic campaign of terror. Settler violence manifests in a wide array of aggressive acts, ranging from verbal intimidation and harassment to theft, arson, vandalism, physical assaults, and killings. These actions are deliberate and calculated, forming part of a broader, systematic effort to inflict harm and destroy Palestinian property. Specific tactics include trespassing on private lands, blocking access to vital resources like land and water, the burning or cutting down of olive trees, vandalizing religious sites such as churches and mosques, throwing stones at Palestinian vehicles, and even firing directly at civilians. There are documented instances of settlers setting fire to homes and erecting signs that declare, "There is no future for you here," signaling an intent to permanently displace residents. The intensity of this violence has surged, particularly since the current Israeli government took office in late 2022 and witnessed a dramatic acceleration following the Hamas-led attack on October 7, 2023. Prior to October 7, 2023, at least 10 Palestinians were killed by settlers in 2023 alone, amidst hundreds of incidents involving harassment, vandalism, and mass rampages. The first half of 2023 recorded 591 settler attacks, averaging 95 incidents per month, marking a 39% increase over the corresponding period in 2022 and representing the sixth consecutive annual rise. The period after October 7, 2023, saw an even more alarming spike, with over 1,000 incidents recorded, leading to the forced displacement of more than 1,300 Palestinians from their homes. The United Nations reported a significant increase in daily settler violence, from an average of 3 incidents per day in 2023 to 7 incidents daily after October 7. Between October 7, 2023 and August 12, 2024, the UN documented 1,264 settler attacks resulting in casualties or property damage, including 21 fatalities, 643 injuries, and the destruction of nearly 23,000 Palestinian-owned trees. The month of June 2025 alone saw 100 Palestinians injured by Israeli settlers, the highest monthly figure since OCHA began documenting casualties in 2005, with this alarming trend continuing into July 2025. Beyond overt acts of aggression, a more insidious form of undocumented and less visible settler violence persists, such as blocking access to water sources or pastures. These actions, while not always resulting in immediate physical harm, instill pervasive fear and have a cumulative effect that often goes unnoticed by external observers. This multifaceted approach to violence serves a purpose beyond immediate destruction. It is designed to inflict profound psychological distress and create an unbearable living environment for Palestinians. The aim is to break the spirit of these communities, making their continued presence untenable. This constitutes a form of psychological warfare, a non-kinetic strategy of control and displacement. The recurrence of such extreme violence, coupled with the systemic lack of accountability, points to a dangerous normalization of brutality within the settler movement and, by extension, within segments of Israeli society and governance that enable it. This erosion of moral and legal boundaries makes future, even more severe, incidents increasingly likely and deepens the humanitarian crisis, fostering a pervasive atmosphere of terror for Palestinians. B. State complicity and support, enabling the violence. The escalating settler violence is exacerbated by a disturbing pattern of state complicity and active support from Israeli authorities. Israeli forces have a documented history of enabling settler violence, frequently standing by idly or, in some cases, actively participating in brutal attacks. The relationship between the Israeli government, its military, and settlers is often described as complementary, indicating a coordinated effort rather than mere passive oversight. Evidence of this complicity is abundant. Verified footage shows Israeli soldiers observing as settlers vandalize Palestinian property, and soldiers have been seen accompanying settlers during arrests or attacks. Alarmingly, some attackers have been observed wearing army uniforms, blurring the lines between civilian and state actors. The current Israeli government, with its far-right ministerial presence, actively emboldens settlers and explicitly supports the expansion of Israeli control in the West Bank. A significant development has been an army recruitment drive that has provided settlers with weapons and uniforms, integrating them as reservists. Furthermore, settlement guard squads have been expanded with the explicit purpose of forcibly displacing Palestinian communities and seizing land. This is not a matter of governmental neglect. It is a declared policy. Church leaders and diplomats have publicly condemned Israeli authorities for facilitating and enabling the presence and actions of settlers, highlighting the institutional backing for these acts. Even when Israeli forces are present during settler rampages, they are often unable to prevent the attack, according to community reports, suggesting either deliberate inaction or a profound lack of will to intervene effectively. This progression from passive enablement to active arming, embedding, and strategic deployment of settlers indicates a fundamental shift. It is no longer simply a failure to enforce the law, but a deliberate integration of settler actions into state policy for territorial expansion and control. This active state sponsorship significantly elevates the legal responsibility. It extends beyond individual criminal liability of settlers to potential state responsibility for aiding, abetting, or directly committing international crimes through proxy actors. This has profound implications for international legal accountability and the application of international humanitarian law. The evidence of state complicity directly contradicts Israel's fundamental obligation as the occupying power to ensure public order, safety, and the protection of the civilian population in the occupied territory. Instead of safeguarding Palestinians, the state apparatus actively contributes to their harm and dispossession. This represents a profound challenge to the principles of international humanitarian law governing occupation, suggesting a deliberate strategy to circumvent legal obligations by blurring the lines between state actors and civilian settlers, effectively using non-state actors to achieve state objectives while attempting to deflect direct state responsibility. This undermines the protective framework intended for occupied populations. C. Case study: the killing of Saif Fallah Musalit. The tragic death of Saif Fallah Musalit on July 11, 2025, serves as a harrowing illustration of the lethal consequences of unbridled settler violence and the systemic failures of accountability. Musalit, a 20-year-old Palestinian American from Tampa, Florida, was beaten to death by Israeli settlers in the village of Al-Mazra'eh Ash-Sharqiyah, near Sinjar, north of Ramallah, while visiting his family. In the same settler attack, a second Palestinian, Mohammed al-Shalabi, was shot dead. Reports indicate that Saif Musalit was attempting to defend his family's land when he was surrounded by a mob of fascist Zionist settlers wielding sticks and bats. A critical detail of this incident is that the settlers deliberately blocked an ambulance and paramedics from reaching Musalit for over 3 hours, preventing any life-saving aid. He succumbed to his injuries before he could be transported to a hospital. Musalit's death marks him as the 5th or 7th American killed in the West Bank since October 2023, underscoring the severe risks faced by Palestinians and those with ties to the region. His family has publicly demanded a thorough investigation by the U.S. State Department and called for accountability for those responsible, describing the event as an unimaginable nightmare and injustice. The U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, acknowledged the gravity of the situation, publicly calling for an aggressive investigation and accountability for this criminal and terrorist act. However, Musalit's uncle articulated a widespread sentiment among Palestinians